great deal. For example, in geology, the best geologists in the world argue over what causes the continents on this planet to drift. It is I
thought you might say that. So I asked Purdue University, a doctor of astronomy, PhD from the University of Illinois, and 3 degrees in astronomy, to give us a statement from the scientific angle concerning astrology. And this is from Dr. Sherman Kanije at Purdue. And he says, as a professional astronomer and as one who has researched the pros and cons of astrology for several years now, I have concluded that, 1, nearly all astronomers would agree that the sun, moon, planets, and even the most distant stars do indeed exert the forces on human beings on the earth. However, the effects, which is what we're talking about, the effects of the sun and the moon on humans are either not well established or are not of the type that traditional astrologers would claim. Traditional astrologers claim more than a mere influence. The claim that the moon's presence in one's sun sign means that one will undergo emotional upheavals has no relation to the occurrence of the tides, for example. Also, the known forces from the stars and planets on a baby are negligible compared to terrestrial forces such as the gravitation of the body of the doctor who delivers the baby.
Sure.
Even given the existence of such forces, there is little reason to believe that they could affect the personalities of babies born when the celestial bodies are at a particular position in the sky. Most statistical studies that have been done to test whether astrology works have failed to confirm astrological claims. The few that do seem to support astrology have been criticized for their poor design or their faulty use of statistical methods.
At the current level of statistical testing, most of the statistical tests that have been used to test astrology are far too primitive a test because the number of variables that are being integrated in some of the conclusions are too great for the statistical test. In other words,
what statistical test do you want to point to that proves your point? Give us something that you think that astrology can prove scientifically.
Well, for example, I think probably one of the more reliable ones is the Gauquelin studies.
I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, let's talk about that.
Okay.
What do you want to say that Gauquelin actually proved?
Well, what Gauquelin demonstrated, and please forgive us for the mispronunciation of his very difficult to pronounce French name. We all say it slightly differently and they're all wrong, I'm sure. We need him here to say how to pronounce it. But basically, Gauquelin tried to demonstrate that if planets were near what astrologers call angles, which is in a more layman sense would be rising, setting on the celestial meridian at the time of birth, at either end of it, that they had a very strong effect on personality. Now, he did not say, for example, the statistical findings demonstrated that if someone had Mars rising at the time of birth, notice we're not talking about astrological signs, we're talking about planets. If we had Mars rising at the time of birth, that there was a slightly greater likelihood that this person might be involved in certain pursuits in life than if they didn't have Mars. We're not saying that everyone that has Mars is going to be involved in that pursuit. For example, he finds a slightly higher characteristic of Mars in military people with military backgrounds.
Can I read you a quote from Gauquelin on his own study?
I know what the quote's going to be.
Okay. Gauquelin himself said this: every attempt, whether of astrologers or scientists, to produce evidence of the validity of astrological laws has been in vain. It is now quite certain that the signs in the sky which presided over our births have no power whatever to decide our fates, to affect our hereditary characteristics, or play any part, however humble, in the totality of effects, random and otherwise, which form the fabric of our lives and mold our impulses to action. Confronted with science, modern and traditional astrology are seen to be imaginary doctrines. Now that's Gauquelin on that very study.
Yes, and I realize, of course, before I even mentioned the Gauquelin that he had
But why did you mention a scientist then as proof when he himself says it's not
Well,
proof?
of course, Gauquelin wrote quite a few books, and the one that you're quoting from is a later book. He reversed his own opinion on some of his own work. I think there are a lot of people that have studied his work that find that the work is to a large extent
All right,
verified.
I asked Dr. Dr. Weldon, in his book, he has researched and done a couple chapters on Gauquelin. Tell us about what you found.
This is the latest book that I could find by Gauquelin, and he says this in the conclusion. He says, "Can there be a conclusion?" He says, "I am still tormented by two feuding demons. The first is the fear of having been mistaken in asserting that astral influence is real. The second is the agonizing thought of all I have been unable to discover or explain." And he goes on to say, after 30 years, he's still fascinated by the subject, and he concludes, quote, "But today I would not allow myself to draw drastic conclusions as I have sometimes done in the past." End quote. So the whole problem with the Gauquelin study is that it's been investigated for 20 years. It is still inconclusive. There have been a number of tests done on the Mars effect, and nothing conclusive can be said about it. It has not proven an astrological effect.
All right, we're going to take a break right here, and I want to come back, to you folks on this, and we got to keep moving. Please stick with us. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back, and we're talking about the scientific evidence for the verification, the validity of astrology. But what I love, and I think people out there in the audience, they just love how sure you astrologers are that this is what it is, okay? And I mean, we haven't crossed that bridge yet. And here I'm quoting another PhD, Ken Boa, who also has a PhD here in the sciences, and he says, how do astrologers know that their method of interpretation is valid? What is the basis, for example, for saying that the sextile and the trine aspects are good and the opposition and square aspects are bad? Is it because of mythology? Who told you guys?
We don't say that. We say something else about them that's been interpreted.
But where do you get that information? I want to know, where did you get it?
You seem to have dwelled on this particular point a great deal.
I'm still waiting for an answer.
Okay, I've given you the answer. I'm going to give you the same answer over again. The basis of science since the Renaissance is to go by information, by data. In other words, you don't make up your mind what something means. You go out and collect data, and you make up your mind after you analyze the data. We have 6,000 years of data.
Okay, let me bring up four things that in reading the literature I've found. Number one is you're assuming about four things. You're assuming, number one, is that you've got an infallible recorder, that they all recorded it absolutely perfect, no errors. And even the guys in the association, Maxine, that I've been reading say, you got to scratch that. We got to do a lot more research, get rid of all the myths, okay?
Sure.
Number two is it would suggest that we have now, after we've gotten this body of literature from an infallible recorder, we have an infallible interpreter to find out where the error is at. In other words, if Maxine's buddies are saying the truth in their books, the fact is that we've still got to weed that out. We don't have a body of information that is solid. And number three, if we did have what you say, this tradition going on back, then there would be just one book. The astrologers would open it up, and it's like Karen was saying, you put the computer on, and basically the things go in, and we all know, and voila, it'd be easy for our scientists to check this out, and we'd be in business. But the problem is the astrologers themselves have different theories, as we've talked about in the other program, and the fact is the data isn't condensed yet. And I think you would admit that yourself, wouldn't you?
Well, yes, John, I thought you were supposed to be asking us the questions.
Well, I'm just saying, isn't that true?
A good deal of what you say is true, but that is also true of every other science to exactly the same degree. Obviously, the problem...
Wait. Yeah, I would really disagree with that. Astrology is so contradictory it can't possibly be true. The people I talked with at the convention, I got different answers on whether or not they used the same house system. There's all kinds of different house systems. The relevancy of the aspects, the angular relationship between planets, on and on and on. Again, one contradiction after